For those of you old enough to remember the early days of the internet, you might have fond memories of spending hours in chat rooms talking to strangers from all over the world, mostly because that was the only thing to do back then, at least until Diablo and StarCraft came around and made the internet awesome. Nowadays, it's basically an underwritten rule that you don't trust anything a stranger tells you online. But back in the more naive days of the internet's younger years, the trend that today is known as catfishing was very popular. Today, we're turning to one of our staff writers as he relives one of his most embarrassing high school memories, all for your enjoyment. The term catfish comes from the 2010 documentary by the same name and refers to the act of being tricked about the identity of someone you communicate with exclusively online. In the film, a young man is catfished into falling in love with a girl he's never met in real life, and spoiler alert, she never existed. Instead, she was the persona of a lonely housewife who had stolen photos from an online model and created a fake Facebook profile to deal with her boring, lonely life. Ever since the release of the documentary, the term has stuck, and every day thousands of people are catfished all around the world, which is pretty surprising considering that by now surely everyone's learned not to trust strangers online. That's probably why I feel a little bit better talking about my own catfishing experience, seeing as I was only 16 years old, and the internet as we know it was a pretty brand new thing. Back then, you still had to use dial-up modems to get online, and if someone needed to make a call, guess what? You're out of luck. My story begins with us first getting our internet hooked up. We were a little late to the internet game, and back then it was mostly still an optional thing rather than the critical necessity that it seems to be today. In fact, it was really more of a novelty than anything else, but my mom thought it would help me with my schoolwork. I still remember watching TV shows thinking about how one day you'd be able to order groceries through the internet or shop for clothes, and it seemed so fantastical and unbelievable. Fast forward to today, and I don't have to leave my house for anything if I choose not to. In fact, I don't even have to leave my bed as long as I have my phone on me. Listen, we might have failed you younger generations by not inventing hoverboards and flying cars yet, but you have no idea the incredible world of whimsy and fantasy that you live in every day. Back in my day, you could barely get through a match of StarCraft without someone getting disconnected because their mom had to make a call. Anyway, I was drawn pretty quickly to the internet chat rooms because the idea of chatting with people all over the world was pretty incredible to me. Nowadays, you can get into flame wars with people from all different cultures, and all it takes is leaving a comment on your favorite informative YouTube channel to do so. But in my day, it was pretty mind-blowing being able to talk about anything with anyone across the world. The big draw, though, naturally, was the chat rooms that were local, and there you could talk to people that lived around you. Naturally, as a teenage boy, this meant talking to girls, and you know what? More often than not, back then, girls were actually real. It was a far less jaded and more novel age, but that would all quickly change. I met Stephanie in an AOL chat room one day after school. For those of you too young to know, AOL was a terrible internet service that used to ship out DVDs straight to your mailbox, letting you install their browser for free. AIM, or AOL Instant Messenger, was pretty much the Facebook of my time. And we didn't have a million emojis to express ourselves with back then. We pretty much had the smiley face, frowny face, and kissy face. And to type them into a message, you had to trudge 2 miles uphill in snow both ways. Stephanie and I got into the habit of chatting constantly, and every day I'd spend at least 2 hours chatting with her online over AIM. We swapped pictures, and that was a hell of a hassle too. Back then you couldn't just snap a selfie on your phone because phones didn't have cameras. You couldn't just snap off a pic with a digital camera either because there were very few digital cameras, and those that existed were pretty expensive. The best thing to do was actually buy a disposable camera, snap your pictures, get them developed, then have them transfer the photos to a DVD, which you could then put into your computer. Have you kids even seen a DVD? I told you, life is so much better today. So I obviously found Stephanie very pretty. She was attractive, but not unrealistically so, which I guess was one of the things that made me feel better about the whole thing. She lived a little bit outside my town, and I didn't have a car back then, so actually meeting up was pretty difficult. We planned it a few times, but it fell apart every time. Instead, we pretty much just settled on talking over Instant Messenger. Stephanie told me that she was attending a local college on the outskirts of town, and even had pics of her dorm room to prove it. She was 19 and thus 3 years older than me, and it was kinda cool that an older girl was into me. Thing is, back then, people were a lot more trusting about this whole internet thing, and even my friends thought the whole thing was really cool and definitely legit. I guess we were all more naive. But the internet hadn't been around long enough yet to crush our souls with the awfulness that is humanity. Stephanie was studying to be a veterinarian, though she would never really talk about her classes or anything like that. I guess in retrospect, I should have found that suspicious. She asked a lot about me, and we both sort of admitted that we were into each other. At this point, I asked if we could just talk on the phone, and she told me that the phone in her room was having issues, so she couldn't. This excuse lasted for about 2 weeks before she finally relented. I called her late one night, and a very gruff voice answered on the other end. This immediately put me off, but, quote, Stephanie, unquote, said that she was very sick and was sorry she sounded terrible. Now, maybe I really wanted Stephanie to exist so badly, or maybe I was just an idiot kid, but I accepted that she was simply sick. We didn't talk on the phone for long and went back to messaging each other. That was the one and only phone call. Much like now, back then you didn't really talk to people that you could just simply message over instant messenger. The only time you would call is if you needed to get a hold of them and they weren't active online. Eventually though, we agreed that we should meet up, though again, she kept postponing. Once more, I should have probably seen the warning signs, but you know what? When you're a kid, you're pretty dumb. Sure, if you're a kid watching this now, you're probably wiser in the ways of the internet than any of us were at your age, but that's because our pain served to teach you. Trust me, you're pretty dumb in a lot of other ways, and you'll realize that with age. If you're young and curious about what the meaning of life is, it's pretty much just the process of finding out how dumb you really are by always getting older and looking back. Anyways, eventually she agreed, and I took a bus to her side of town. I remember being really nervous, but also really excited. We seemed to get along so well online, and we had so many similar interests. It was exciting to meet someone that you clicked with so well face to face at last. Things, however, wouldn't quite work out like that. I looked around the bus stop confused, as there were very few people there. Few people had cell phones back then, so sending a "Hey, where are you?" text wasn't an option. Instead, I waited around until the bus stop cleared, looking for a teenage girl 3 years older than me the whole time. What I hadn't been paying attention to was the middle-aged woman at the far end of the bus stop sitting by herself and watching me. The bus stop cleared out except for just us two. I waited a little bit more, growing more frustrated. Suddenly, the woman stood up and began to walk over to me. Again, no alarm bells, no recognition that something was terribly wrong, just a middle-aged woman approaching me for some reason. I kinda miss being that naive, to be honest. This woman said my name, and that's the moment a cold chill settled in my spine. Her voice was gruff, and I recognized it. It was the sound of a chain smoker that had told me she was just really sick and had a sore throat. My eyes widened when I realized the truth. She didn't do anything, just kinda stood there. I could tell that she knew that I knew, and I could see that she was kind of ashamed. We didn't need to say it out loud, it was obvious to both of us. The silence stretched on for a pretty long time, and finally she just said, "I'm sorry." Then she walked away. I sat down at the bus stop and waited for a bus to come around so I could catch it home. I planned to be out all day, but clearly, I was now determined to head straight back home. The whole time waiting at that stop and on the ride home, I just kept thinking about this middle-aged woman. I felt deeply embarrassed, stupid, angry, and really sad inside. A whirlwind of emotions. Unknowingly, I had just become a cautionary tale for the internet age, and one of the reasons why you today know not to trust any online strangers. After a few weeks, I kept thinking about that middle-aged woman and what she had done. It's easy to ridicule her for stealing some young kid's photos and pretending to be someone she wasn't to talk to teenagers. But the more I thought about it, the more terrible I felt for her. Here was a woman who has lived such an unfulfilling life that she felt the need to become someone else. I looked into her eyes, and there was no malice there, just a deep sense of shame at what she'd done. Plus, she had actually come to the bus stop when she could have just ignored me, blocked me on Messenger, and let it lie. Some part of her knew that what she'd done was really wrong and that she had to make it right. No, we never talked about anything sexual or anything like that. We actually just talked about life stuff for a teenager anyway. Music, school, random things that are so important when you're at that age, but completely meaningless in your adult life. That's what made me feel so bad for her. She had created this persona not just to escape her own dreary life, but to either relive her own younger years or to live out a fantasy that when she was younger, she was popular or cool or pretty. Yeah, it can be easy to make fun of people who catfish until you consider the deep loneliness or dissatisfaction with life that leads people to do this. We call them weirdos or losers when in reality they're just human beings like us trying to fulfill an emotional need that's missing in their life, or perhaps trying to live a life they never could otherwise. I still don't think you should trust people online, and my story is kind of really embarrassing to this day, but I find myself thinking about that woman from time to time. I wonder if she ever found something fulfilling in her own life, or if she still lurks the internet trying to live the life she wished she could have lived as opposed to the one she got. Have you ever been catfished? Have any embarrassing online stories of your own? Tell them to us in the comments. Now check out why the dark web became the place you should never visit. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great content.